Let me tell you something, brother. Today on Out in Bloomal, we got brother Logan Bruce, professional wrestling booker, and the man behind Bloomington Normal's own independent wrestling promotion, Iron Spirit Pro.
In this day and age, there are guys making more money than, let's say, the lower level WWE guys. Every single time you get in the ring, you're putting your body into someone else's hands. You're risking serious injury.
So it's hard to come up with what a typical Iron Spirit wrestler would be because they come from so many backgrounds and they're just kind of connected by that love of wrestling.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's hard to imagine that some of these guys weren't athletes or weren't, gym rats or anything like that, because, they're so jacked now. It's like, you did not do that in the last year. You know what I mean? You've been doing this a while, you know what you're doing. And then I would say another huge successful thing, which we really probably could not be in business without, is support from local sponsors. But the crowd was so amped up, you're seeing it so close, these sort of legendary figures. Seeing it live in person is completely different than seeing it on TV, especially in an intimate venue where you're so close to things.
Today, location and support was provided by Bloomington Normal Zone, 5 Alarm CrossFit. 5 Alarm, why wait? Professional wrestling is something that I've liked my whole life, and there are some connotations that people have about it. I think that the best way that I've ever heard it described is it's one of the last vestiges of Shakespeare in the Round, where you have people who are performing physical theater on an upraised platform around a circle of people. And I thought that that was the best description that I've ever heard. So Logan, how did your life bring you to pro wrestling?
How did my life bring me to pro wrestling? Well, I was a fan as a young child. I got a terrible memory, so I can't quite remember the first match I ever saw or anything like that. But I mean, there are pictures of me in kindergarten with an NWO t-shirt, in the yearbook, you know what I mean? So or when I was 4 years old and I got my little Ric Flair, my little Arn Anderson doll. Mm-hmm. So since I was a child, absolutely. My dad was kind of into it. And, as a kid, especially at that time, the early 90s, so I was born in 89, so talking 93, 94, a lot of colorful characters, Sting, Surfer Sting was my favorite. The face paint, the blonde flat top and everything.
That's actually my first professional wrestling memory, is watching Sting go in with this. He jumped on this Vader character, and this guy looked just frightening.
Vader, absolutely.
So there were a lot of larger-than-life characters.
Absolutely, and that's honestly probably what I still love about it the most, as I've grown older. But back to the question, when I was a kid, absolutely into it, really hardcore, and then this sort of what they call the Attitude Era kicked off in the late 90s. And I was kind of a WCW kid, and then it goes to WWF at the time, and I was kind of jumping back and forth. And then kind of WWF took over with The Rock and Steve Austin and all those guys. And then I kind of stopped watching and I stopped caring maybe when I was 12 or so, probably around 2001-ish, kind of the end of WCW. I think I was just, I want to say I was maturing out of it because the product was pretty mature at the time. But I just kind of got into other things. I was really into music and stuff like that. And I kind of stopped watching until about 2011, I think. And then got back into it heavy in the same ways, but also in the different ways. Like I said, the larger-than-life characters I loved again for some reason, but also the physicality of it, the athleticism, which I was never into sports. I'm still not really into sports. But that's the first time that athleticism or that kind of thing interested me because they were doing cool stuff.
Being able to step back and really appreciate it for being the art form that some people look that it is. Now, you say that larger-than-life characters was a big reason as for why you started. Do you feel like that's something that Iron Spirit is able to contain, these larger-than-life characters, or is it a little bit more about that physicality that you were talking about?
We try to have a little bit of everything. A lot of the guys at this level, this sort of, let's say regional level, some national guys, but mostly let's say regional level, they kind of, when they get out of training, they learn the moves first, right? How do you do the thing? How do you run the ropes? How do you headlock? All that kind of stuff. So you at least know what you're doing in the ring. And then the character stuff kind of comes later. I think a lot of that is worked out over time in the ring. You kind of find what people the crowd like, what they dislike, what they react to, sort of thing. So when we're using a lot of guys who maybe are a little younger, they might be a little less on the character side, just because they haven't developed it. A lot of guys want to be like the cool guy. I'm still out there doing cool moves and stuff, which is awesome, and I love booking those kind of guys. But we've also booked guys who are more character based. Like I said, I just like to have that variety. It interests me. The crowds that we have, they really respond to that kind of stuff. The crowds we have usually, they just love to boo and they love to cheer. So if you go out there and you just mouth off, you're going to get a reaction.
Yeah.
So we try to have a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the kind of understated things that people don't understand when you go back behind the curtain on professional wrestling, is that the crowd is not just there to view it. In the best cases, they're going to be the participant. What do you feel with Iron Spirit? And this, you said that you've done 7 successful shows, or that January was going to be the 7th?
January, it'll be volume 8. We had to cancel one show, so technically the 7th, but we'll say 8th that we've booked.
Now, do you ever feel like there were some moments where the crowd just really made the show?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so early on, we had some pretty good success in terms of drawing crowds. And they were just, man, that first show, September of 2018, obviously I went in not knowing what to expect. And when that crowd was up, man, there was nothing like it. Like I said, we have people who just want to be there. You know what I mean? They want to be part of the show, like you said. And local wrestling hadn't come to Bloomington Normal in the 5 years that I've lived here, maybe once, and it wasn't even local. It was an outside company coming in. So I think people were just ready for it to be here. We've had shows that maybe didn't draw as much, kind of a smaller crowd. But even the people who do come out are like the really hardcore fans. So they don't want it to be awkward if there's not very many people. So they'll be like extra loud. And that just like melts my heart. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we had a show, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we had a show maybe 2 weeks ago now at Night Shop in downtown Bloomington. So it was like in their beer garden, so it was an outside show. About 25 degrees. Yeah, it was pretty miserable, and I was like dreading it all day, and guys were going out there and wrestling, with the half clothes on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the crowd was out there in coats and stocking caps, and you could tell everyone was a little bit miserable, but man, they were hot all night because they were just into it and just having fun.
They probably had to be.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
It's probably just a lot colder to sit on your hands. I don't know that I've ever heard of anybody wrestling in sub-freezing conditions, but I do know that wrestling, it's no joke. It is something that is just really hard to do. And you mentioned that some people kind of build almost foundationally upon that physicality. How hard is it to be a professional wrestler?
I would hate to speak for wrestlers because I myself am not a wrestler. But being around it enough, it is, let's say this, Kurt Angle, an Olympic gold medalist in wrestling, transitioned to pro wrestling in the late 90s. He said it was the hardest thing he's ever had to do. A lot of guys say that. And it's just a very unnatural thing to do, to allow yourself to fall.
Yes.
To throw yourself around, to not defend yourself, let's say. People have misconceptions about, let's say, even what the ring is. I'll tell you, it's a steel frame, it's steel cross beams, and it's 2x4s or whatever they are. And there's, I don't know, half an inch of padding.
You're not wrestling on pillows.
You protect the wood more than you protect your body with that padding. And that's all it is. Every bump, every fall they take hurts, they say.
Yeah.
Now, the idea is that you do that over and over again and you build up a tolerance to it. You build up calluses across your body. That's why when guys take off for injury, even if they're out for like 3 weeks and they don't wrestle, they come back. That first fall back hurts, they say.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not a wrestler, so I can't really speak to it. But in the year that we've done it, we probably had maybe 4 guys out injured. So, I mean, it happens.
Yeah, and it's truly an anachronistic sort of thing, because you look at most, like if you were to compare it to, say, UFC or boxing, you're going into a competitive element where you are trying to hurt somebody. Like that's the purpose. The performers that get in there, they're really more trying not to hurt people, but to make it look as athletic as possible. Have you had any experiences with your wrestlers that, they've really just put their body into another performer's hands?
Every single time you get in the ring. every single time you get in the ring, you're putting your body into someone else's hands. You're risking serious injury. Even the most basic of, chain wrestling, headlock, push off, shoulder tackle down, like the most basic of wrestling matches, every time you hit the ground, you're risking injury. If you don't fall right, you could really hurt yourself. We haven't had anybody go too crazy yet in our rings, but I mean, guys are flying off the top, guys are flying outside the ring. We don't have pads outside of our ring. It's just either concrete or it's, whatever a gym floor is made out of. So literally every time they get in the ring, it's rough. I'll say at the last show, a guy took, I think it was a super kick to the chin, kind of had to ice that down afterwards. We had a guy spill out to the ring and stab his ribs on the corner of a stair up to the ring, and took the wind out of him real quick there for the rest of the night. So nothing major, thankfully, but
the sort of things that if it happened to a normal person, they'd be done for like the day or the week. But I'm guessing that he continued on.
Oh yeah, he wrestled he wrestled the entire match and then wrestled the next day, and yeah, absolutely, that's what you do.
It's a hard life. I had heard that one of the sayings that people use is that you might end up driving 12 hours for a hot dog and a handshake.
Right.
Now, you had spoken to me earlier. What's the farthest away that someone has come to work with Iron Spirit Pro?
That's a good question. That is a lot of the fun of it, because there's a lot of wrestling companies around, and especially in Illinois, and there's a good crop of Midwest guys. But the fun is picking those guys out from other places. So we kind of got a car from Cleveland that's come out to a couple shows. We talked about Dion Roosman, who's originally from Alaska. Mm-hmm. So he moved here to the Midwest to train, and is kind of homesteading here now. So he kind of goes back and forth. One guy, Dante Leon, he kind of splits his time between Texas and the Midwest. He's kind of originally from Texas, so sometimes he'll have to drive up. Mm-hmm. But technically, the farthest we've had is a guy, Jackson Kelly, who was from Australia. I don't know if he got his original training in Australia, but he came here to train, moved back home, wrestled there, and then came here on a tour of 4 or 6 weeks or whatever, kind of doing some loops, and we booked him to come through. So technically Australia, which is pretty fascinating. We could say we're an international company in that way.
That's a heck of a drive.
That is a heck of a drive, yes sir.
Now, for people that don't know, professional wrestling is not like a localized phenomenon within the United States. Is that mm-hmm. correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's wrestling all over the world. The big areas are, the United States, you have sort of a lucha libre. In Mexico, sort of the mask thing. It's kind of different styles. The UK is getting really popular now, probably the last 10 years. Obviously it was popular in the 80s and the 90s and stuff with what's called the World of Sport style. Big in Japan, getting bigger all the time. Yeah, it's definitely everywhere. Mm-hmm.
Now let's take things back just a little bit. How do your family members feel about what you do, working with professional wrestling? Do they appreciate the art of it as much as you seem to, or do they kind of feel like, how do your family feel about Iron Spirit?
At this point, they're very excited and very supportive. When we first started, my wife was a little hesitant, uh-huh. right? So I would watch wrestling, and she would go to stuff with me sometimes, and seeing it in person is a lot different. So she could watch it in person, have a lot of fun. Didn't really care to watch it on TV every week. But when we, first put our thing together, like I said, September of 2018 was our first show. She was supportive. She absolutely supports me in everything I do. A little worried, just to make sure things go right. There's money at stake, right? I'm investing my personal money into this. But the more shows we've had, the more into it she gets. You know what I mean? And we start to book the same people and over again, so you kind of get to know these guys a little bit. You get to know their sort of style in the ring, and the fact that we're sort of building something, just to see it grow every time, just really, pulls everybody in a lot more. Outside of that, my family, let's say my parents, they weren't surprised in the slightest. They're like, oh yeah, absolutely, you're doing that, because...
I'm surprised you didn't start earlier.
Exactly. And going back to the original story, like how I was into wrestling, when I got back into it in 2011, this is really weird, but the first thing that kind of got me back into it was a gag gift for Christmas, or my parents got me one of the video games, which I hadn't played those in 10 or 12 years at that point. And like, oh, hey, you used to like this, go play this. And I started playing it. And I'm like, yes, this is awesome. Throwing these guys around this video game. And then started to get back into it. So I'm like, now, mom and dad, it's kind of your fault that I'm doing this.
I'm back in.
back in.
Better just hook it right up to my veins.
Exactly.
Now, family is something that's important to most people. Do you feel like Iron Spirit is the sort of thing that more approaches like a niche crowd, or do you feel like the entire family coming in would be able to get something out of it?
Our first 6 shows were all family-friendly shows. They were designed, like I keep saying, they're designed to have a little bit of everything and to kind of appease every fan in the audience. So, we would have the more basic character-driven stuff that might be a little more, I don't want to say childish, but appeals to the kids, like I said, the big characters. And then the guys, let's say like in their mid-20s, are kind of maybe more into that cool, fast-paced, throwing guys around style. So we try to have a little bit of that as well. But it's definitely been family-friendly. Our last show we did, like I said, at the Night Shop, which is a local bar, music venue, restaurant. Technically, it was all ages, but it wasn't necessarily a family-friendly show. I think it's got a little more rowdy, a little more mature, we'll say, because people were drinking, they were having a good time. So I think the more diverse we can get, the better. So our show coming up January 11th is back at our normal venue, the Normal Community Activity Center. That's back to an all-ages show again, a family-friendly show, which is really sort of our bread and butter, and maybe spice it with some bar shows now and then.
So really what it comes down to is kind of mirroring your audience and giving them a show that they're going to enjoy.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It seems like wrestling has kind of gone through like these phases. Like you started off in the 80s and it was definitely going to be that kid-friendly, character-driven sort of concept. And as you evolved, it kind of got a little bit rougher and it kind of seems like it's going back in that different direction. How do you feel that Iron Spirit is going to evolve over time? Like what are your aspirations with it particularly and wrestling in general?
At this point, we really just want to make a solid foundation here in Bloomington Normal. And that's kind of been our goal since day one, to really ingrain ourselves into the community, to have a sort of consistent entertainment experience here in town that's really novel and unique, because there's nothing really like it here, right? So that's really been our main focus. Now, having said that, we did one show in Urbana back in August, I believe it was, of this year, which was a lot of fun because they also don't really have a consistent wrestling show there, which is kind of also why I started this, because I saw Bloomington Normal and no one was running here, and I've seen a lot of really small shows in like some small towns across the Midwest, and I'm like, how are these people running these shows? And like, not going broke because it's like a small town and there's like nobody there, but yet nobody's running Bloomington Normal. That's like this big population center, in central Illinois. So I'm like, well, why don't I just do it? So I see things in like Champaign-Urbana where no one's doing that now either. So like we kind of went there and, maybe we'll go back there once or twice in 2020 maybe. And we're looking at maybe a couple other cities, but really the goal is to focus here in Bloomington Normal. We've had our ups and downs over the last year, trying to, level the field there a little bit. Now we kind of know, let's say, our average draw, kind of what our budget's going to be, that sort of business side of it. So we can kind of say, this is the average, this is what we can expect. What does it mean to even grow, because it's been such up and down this past year. Like I said, we've kind of leveled out, which is great. We would like to keep it to maybe 1 or 2 venues in town. We've kind of jumped around a little bit just out of necessity, out of scheduling and things like that. But we don't want to, I don't know what the word is, maybe confuse the audience, like, oh, where are they going to be this month? Like, they're over here, and like, kind of confuse it. But
you want to have that consistency.
Absolutely. I mean, we love the Normal Community Activity Center. It's a great space. We thought we might outgrow it a little bit early on because we hit some big numbers really early on because it's kind of a small space. But now that we've, like I said, we kind of evened out a little bit, it definitely works for us. And it's just the right size because it's not too big, because we've run like the YWCA gymnasium, which is like huge. And so like, even if you get 200 people in there, it's not going to look filled because it's such a big space. So like, this community center is perfect size, and we like the intimate feel of it. Not only does it look full, but if you're 3 feet from the ring, you can see the guys hitting each other. You can see the sweat flying off them. It's a great experience. And then also having, like I said, the bar shows at Night Shop, who's been a great supporter of ours since day one. Again, those are outdoor shows, so you kind of always run the risk of either cold weather or like rain come spring and summer. So who knows what we'll do with those, but
you got to hope you don't get rained out.
Exactly.
Now, you had mentioned that both in Urbana and around here, that there really isn't anybody currently doing professional wrestling. So what is it that you feel like you compete against, and how do you get people's attention, and where are you getting it from?
Well, so there's nobody in town doing that wrestling right now. There was some sort of people coming in and out of town once we started. I don't know what's going on with that. But in Urbana, they don't really have anything. There's stuff in Springfield. There's kind of some new things popping up in Peoria. So like everything's kind of, and like LaSalle had a really big company. So everything's kind of like an hour away. So like let's say between here and there, what are we competing with? Literally any other entertainment option in town, I think. Since we are so unique, we'll kind of have that core audience of wrestling fans who are going to come out to every show. And like we were talking about, those are kind of the loudest guys, and we love having them,
Mm-hmm.
And we've definitely built people who are not just wrestling fans, but now are Iron Spirit fans,
Mm-hmm.
which is amazing to me.
I don't remember who it was that I was reading on Twitter when I was looking for Iron Spirit Wrestling, but they had said that like it was the second most important thing that they thought was in wrestling right now, and this was referencing like some national things that were going on.
Right.
So there seems like there are some performers that are just really love what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I saw that same thing, and like I said, it melts my heart.
Now, do you feel like wrestling is different now because of the internet? Like, how is Iron Spirit kind of capitalizing on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it definitely is. A lot of our fans, it's hard to ask where everyone's from, but if I was to take a guess based on like, billing information when we do ticket sales, maybe 60 to 70% are local people. And then really surprised me early on, we had people from around the area, let's say an hour to hour and a half out, like people come from St. Louis, like coming to check it out, because we booked, certain matches that they want to see. And so that's just like amazing. So like with that, it's not really necessarily the internet, because it's like more of a localized thing, in terms of the crowd coming out. But there is always that, outside of these shows, Iron Spirit, and I think a lot of wrestling companies live on the internet, right? Like from a day-to-day thing, nothing's happening with Iron Spirit unless it's on the internet, or unless it's show day, So it's kind of this weird thing where it kind of exists, but it doesn't really exist until it exists, So the internet is huge. Obviously, social media is, the biggest way we promote. I'm still an old school guy where I go around and post flyers and posters around town, just because that, grassroots thing on the ground, you can't beat it. But of course, promoting on social media. And then another big thing is, our last two shows have been on a website called independentwrestling.tv. You can use the promo code Iron Spirit to get your first 20 days free. It's an incredible service. I was on there even before we were on there, just as a fan watching stuff. So it has independent wrestling promotions from all around the country, and they even have some international stuff, Japan and Mexico. They do some live streams, but it's a lot of back catalog stuff. So $9.99 a month, I believe it is, the $10 a month thing. It's an incredible service. And they have 5,000 hours of content on there now. So it's incredible. So that kind of thing, we haven't done great numbers yet just because we're so new and we only have 2 shows up on there, but it's getting our name out there. Like you said, people were comparing it to national things and like, this is awesome. Or, like we were talking about, I like to book guys who maybe haven't wrestled before, which is a lot of fun. Or, we're so centrally located that we can grab guys out of Chicago and St. Louis who maybe have never touched and put them in the ring together, because we're kind of like the midpoint, And so people be like, oh, that's a match I never knew I wanted, so let's go check it out, kind of thing. So it's a great exposure. It's a great tool to use. And then we put some random free matches on YouTube, which gets some good numbers. Yeah, the internet. It's like I said, it's where everything kind of lives right now.
It's vital to the brand now.
Absolutely, and for the wrestlers themselves, that's how you connect with your fans. Absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't know, a lot of the feedback like you talked about. That person saying we were number 2 on their interest list or whatever. Like, I wouldn't know that if it wasn't on social media. Like, what are they going to do? Write me a letter? Like, how did they do that in the past? I don't even know.
Well, I'm sure it just kind of came down to you knew how good the show was and whether or not you had to sneak the bad guys out of the building, right?
Yeah. Oh, if only we could live in those times again.
Well, I'm sure the performers like it a little bit better nowadays. That's actually a question that I had for you, because you said that you try to book a lot of people who this is like their first time wrestling. If someone didn't know that something like this existed, how did most other people end up getting into wrestling?
if they didn't know what existed.
If they didn't know that Iron Spirit was around, how would they start their pro wrestling journey?
Back to the internet, right? You just Google it. So at this point in time, there are a lot of schools, academies, dojos, whatever they call themselves, that are in business to train wrestlers. You know, a lot of people think Bloomington Normal, Central Illinois is in the middle of nowhere, but like I was talking about, we're kind of in the middle of a lot of cool things. So you have probably maybe the biggest one is the Black and Brave Wrestling Academy in the Quad Cities, which Seth Rollins runs. So Seth Rollins, like WWE champion, WrestleMania main eventer, like top of the top. He trains kids there to wrestle because he's from there. So that's 2.5 hours from us. There's a new one opened up in Chicago, Freelance Wrestling Academy, which is really great. So some of our workers are trainers there. You have guys in St. Louis. So really at this point, there's a lot of options to get really the best training that's probably ever been around.
Mm-hmm. It's something that you needed, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
So what sort of strategies, habits, or routines are essential to your effectiveness? Like what do you do other than going and putting up posters before the show that really makes you good at what you do?
Well, if I can say I'm good at what I do, who knows? But yeah, fans keep coming back, so we're doing something right. You know, I think the biggest thing is putting on a good show. Honestly, if we put out, if we did our first show, obviously those fans had never seen us before, right? They probably recognize a lot of the wrestlers, which is great, but a lot of the wrestlers I'm sure they haven't seen before. So they came out for this sort of curiosity factor. And if we went out there and did a terrible show with, I don't want to bury anybody, but there's a lot of wrestlers out there who are kind of like pretend wrestlers, right? They're whatever. They go out there and play wrestler. If we went out there and put on a really bad show, those fans will not come back. So I think that's the key. Word of mouth is great. Like I said, most of our stuff is so local that word has just been getting around. The promotion side of it, it's hard because I go back and forth between wanting to post stuff every day online, which probably makes sense, but if I'm promoting, let's say, our show on January 20th or on January 11th, 2020, what's there really to post every single day? I can only post the flyer so many times before people get annoyed, like they know what's going on. So it's that balance between wanting to promote a lot and then just letting things happen organically.
Not letting people get burnt out.
Exactly. So we let them know, we do, sponsored social media posts. We've been working with WZND this last show at ISU campus to pass out some flyers and stuff like that for promotional purposes. But you try really, and I don't know, we've been doing the best job at this. Probably need to do it more, which is really helpful, is to sort of build matches that people want to see. So it's really hard. So one of my favorite things in wrestling, probably my favorite thing, is like storylines, right? Why are these two guys even wrestling? If it's just two guys to go out there wrestle, I'm sure they'll put on a good match. It's probably fun in person, but if every match is like that, then like who cares, So to put guys together who, have a feud, they have a grudge, whatever it is, that's really the fun part. And we've tried to slowly get into that, just to build up some of these characters more. That's really hard to do, mostly because of scheduling. Let's say these two guys go at it and we want them to do a rematch. Well, maybe I can't get the one guy the next time because he's booked somewhere else, and et cetera. So you got to push it off, and it's like, really hard. But I think the more you can do that, the more invested the fans become. Even if it's not necessarily a storyline, let's say it's just, two guys together, you can still promote it as, why do these guys want to win? So with us, we try to make wins and losses matter. There's still certain booking elements that we, can fudge, but let's say, these two guys are both undefeated, well, there you go, put them together and one of them's going to lose, So like, that's how you promote it. And you push that, like, one guy is going to lose their undefeated streak this time, So the more you can do that to build up those matches, makes people want to come out and see those. And then I would say another huge successful thing, which we really probably could not be in business without, is support from local sponsors. That was a thing that when I first started, one, you just don't know how people are going to react to wrestling, because has certain connotations about it. and then two, how much are people willing to support that sort of thing. And the sponsors that we got for that first show like just blew me away at how supportive they were and how into it they were. And they kept coming back, and we've got more sponsors since then. So without that, let's be honest, financially, we probably wouldn't be able to be where we're at. But also that support, because they cross-post on their social media, or we put up flyers in their business, or they do special promotions things. So like at our last show at the Night Shop, I keep bringing it up because they've been, like I said, supporters since day one, and they're really cool people. We also had Triptych Brewing from Champaign area come out, and they did a tap takeover of the beer garden. So like that was kind of a unique thing, right? We never served alcohol at our previous shows because they were family friendly, but not only could we serve alcohol here, but we got Triptych Brewing involved, and they did this whole thing where they've had beers they've never had before at Night Shop, and like sort of a unique experience. So you try to make, that's a good point. You try to make every show an experience, a unique experience. You have the wrestling there, and that's fine, but there's a point at this level where you can meet the wrestlers, you can shake their hand, you can take a picture with them, you're super close to the action. So it's like, it's completely different than going to the Coliseum and seeing a huge product. That's a very long-winded answer, but there's that's what we try to do. If we're a success or not.
I'm sure that really only even scratches the surface, because it's not something that's simple. You had mentioned that you wouldn't want to put on somebody that was going out there to play wrestler. And I imagine that those people are probably rare in something like this, but they do exist. But for
your words, not mine.
I'm just trying to be supportive.
Yeah.
I just imagine that in order to get into something like this, like you can't get into it not loving it, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. People at this level, absolutely. There are probably people who do it like, people, they get on like Brock Lesnar because sometimes he acts like he doesn't care about wrestling, which I'm sure he really does, but like he's just going out there because he happens to be, a collegiate athlete and like football player and all this, and like a crazy athlete. So like it's something he could do to make money at. Like you kind of go back to like we were talking like the 80s or maybe the territorial days where they get like bodybuilders, they'll pick them off the street like, dude, you're jacked. You ever thought about being a wrestler? Well, I've never watched wrestling in my life, but I could do that, So I would say at this level, like if you have kids like coming out of high school or coming out of college that go into training, those guys are probably in it because they love it. Absolutely.
Okay. So would you say that's the majority of the people that you manage to put out there are people that just do this because they're passionate about it?
Absolutely. I would say, a lot of them are working to do this for a living. Absolutely. They want to make it their career, sort of thing. I'm sure there are a couple people who are like sort of weekend warriors. Like this is something I do and I'm really good at and I love it, but I just do have to go out there to have fun because I'm passionate about it. Make a few bucks on the side, it's cool, but like I'd go out there and do it.
Yeah.
We don't put anybody in the ring, who doesn't love it, or who's not good at it.
And I imagine that there are most people that have to have a day job in order to be able to facilitate this sort of thing. But it seems to me that you're getting people in there that really want to be there and want to make that their career. Do you feel like people are able to have a career doing it just out of like this at the local level, or is there a next step?
There's a sort of different strata of independent wrestling promotions. Absolutely. There are guys at that sort of national, international level who are still independent wrestlers, i.e. not WWE, not AEW, not New Japan, not exclusive contracted wrestlers who do this full time, and it's their job, absolutely. And they make, and in this day and age, there are guys making more money than, let's say, the lower level WWE guys. You can make your own bookings. You can charge what you want to charge. You get all your money for your merch and all your, 8x10 sales and all that stuff. It doesn't have to go through a middleman or a manager, so you're getting all the income yourself, as long as you're, entrepreneurial in spirit. So there's definitely an opportunity for that.
Yeah, if you've got the hustle, you can
absolutely
you can make it doing this.
Absolutely, but you have to hustle probably 10 times as hard at the bottom. If you're wanting to make this your career, you're out there literally every weekend making towns, as they say. Even if you're not booked to wrestle, you still might want to drive 10 hours to that show, go help set up the ring and show your face to the promoter. That's kind of like an antiquated sort of thing, but it still happens, where you got to like pay your dues, as they say. Yeah. But yeah, if you want it, you got to make those sacrifices. Absolutely.
Yeah. But that's kind of like the American dream concept, though, is that you have to go into something and maybe you do have to put in your dues, but by working hard at it, you would end up being able to make it, as it were. Do you feel like there are wrestlers right now with iron spirit that you say, okay, this is someone that I know is going to make it?
Well, we have very good examples of those, and I'm not going to take credit for any of these guys' success because we've only been in business a year, let's say. There's two very good examples. So Stephen Wolf is actually a guy from Peoria, who I've been watching for years, who's just so good. He was good back then, and he's even better now. Stephen Wolf, he's wrestled for us, I think, twice. And I think in between those two shows, he got signed to a company called Evolve Wrestling, which is a company that's sort of like loosely connected to the WWE. It's kind of like the unofficial feeder system at this point. Mm-hmm. It's not that you have to go to Evolve to go to WWE, but if you go to Evolve, you have a lot of WWE people looking at you a lot. Mm-hmm. And WWE people sometimes work Evolve shows and vice versa. So he got signed to that company. He still does independent bookings, which is great. So that's like that kind of next step as you're talking about. He is signed to that. Again, not because he worked for us, but we booked him because he was good, and because he's good, he got signed. Mm-hmm. Another good example is Shotzi Blackheart. She's this incredible wrestler. I don't know where. I think she might have been from California originally, then like Texas, and then the Midwest. So when we booked her, she was based out of the Midwest, out of the Indianapolis area. She was kind of a surprise wrestler on one of our shows. Just a really great wrestler, has a lot of buzz on the national independent scene. She was contracted to Evolve, and she just got signed to NXT, which is WWE's official development deal system. They just got put on the USA Network, if you've seen that on Wednesday nights now. So it's not even really a developmental brand anymore. It's like a third brand. Like you got Raw, SmackDown, and now NXT, which is live every Wednesday. So she got signed to that company. So she is working with the WWE now. Mm-hmm. So again, not because she worked for us, but I mean, like at this level, you take all the shows you can, because one, it's experience, right? You get to wrestle different people in front of different crowds, find what works, find what doesn't work, honing your craft is what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And also, you never know who's watching. Obviously someone saw her, someone saw Stephen Wolf at some other show somewhere, probably a bigger show than ours, and said, that person's good, let's sign him. Mm-hmm.
But even if you're not taking credit for what people are doing, by putting
I'm humble like that. That's my nature. Yeah.
This person, I'm getting 10% of what they're going to be getting
absolutely.
From now on. If you put on a good show and you develop a bigger following and you build that buzz, like that's going to get more eyes on your product, but also get more eyes on them, so that maybe someone might look at them and consider them for that sort of position. So kind of by doing the best that you can, when you get your performers who come in and do the best that they can, they're going to end up, really advancing themselves. So that hard work is there.
Absolutely. And those two examples that I used, Stephen Wolf and Shotzi Blackheart, now that I think about it, they're kind of two really different examples, because Shotzi, she had been around for a long time. She was doing stuff. I don't know her social media followers or whatever, but she had like a really big following. She did a couple TV spots and this and that. So when the WWE went to look at her, they probably saw like, not only she's a really good wrestler, but she's got a following, she's out there hustling, like people know her, people like her. So that's great. Whereas Stephen Wolf, he probably hadn't done as much nationally, but he went to like a tryout camp and impressed him in the ring. Great guy, coachable, that kind of thing. And so he probably had 1/10 of the Twitter followers that Shotzi Blackheart had, but he was still good enough that, they wanted to sign him, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wrestling seems like it is definitely, we had spoken earlier about it going through different phases, but it feels like that there's been a paradigm shift. You had mentioned Shotzi Blackheart. I think that when you first started wrestling, women involved in wrestling was a completely different manner, and now, not only is it something that's legitimate in its own right, there are a lot of people that think that like women's wrestling is something that's even bigger than the men's side. How do you feel How do you feel that women's wrestling is going to kind of carry forward into the future with both Iron Spirit and wrestling in general?
Yeah, Iron Spirit, I hate to put a number on it, but like we've had a women's match every show that we've had. We'd like to do more, like everyone says. We love to have more women on the shows. I would love to get to a point in society where I don't think about it, I just book them. But like, we are making a conscious effort to do that, and make sure everyone gets an opportunity, to be as diverse as possible and to have sort of all those, possibilities covered. Because, again, I go back to Shotzi, but that was a great example because, man, when we booked her and she was out during intermission, like she had like a line of people wanting to take pictures with her. Like one of my really good friends had his like 10-year-old daughter take a picture of her and he was like, this is her favorite wrestler now. So like, that's like amazing, that this whatever 10-year-old girl who knows how much she had watched wrestling, but she came to the show and saw a woman in there like kicking ass, like that's awesome, right? Yeah. How do I see it going forward? We just give as many people opportunities as possible. Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that's going to change how people perceive wrestling? Like now you might be, instead of it just being like the boyhood dream in order to, make that big impact at the grandest stage of them all, maybe it's also like the girlhood dream. Do you feel like that's something that making those bookings could help to facilitate?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would love to see more women at this level. I don't know, I don't want to put myself in anyone's shoes. I don't know if it's something where they don't have good role models. Like maybe now they will because, Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey main evented WrestleMania a year or two ago or whenever it was.
Which if you went back 10 years ago, probably someone would tell you crazy if you thought that was going to happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was kind of surprised when it actually did end up happening, now. So maybe after that, maybe the next few years, you'll see more women getting at this level. And maybe it is something where someone sees someone at our show and thinks they could do it. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I would love that. I think the only sort of barrier we have now is that since there are so few women's wrestlers, let's say in the Midwest at this regional level, and there's even fewer good ones, let's say, that they get used a lot. They wrestle each other a lot. They're booked a lot. So it's kind of hard to book really good women's wrestling matches, just from a booker's perspective. Just because their schedule is hard to get, and they've all wrestled each other a million times because there's only so many of them. Yeah. So the more there are, the bigger it's going to be.
I bet that gives them just a little bit of power, though.
It does, yeah. You could. If you were hustle enough and you're a woman and you're 18 and you love wrestling, you could say, yeah, these girls are working every single weekend. They can charge what they charge, and there's some absolutely great talent. It's not even worth it comparing it to the guys because they're just as good. Yeah,
they'd have to be great in order to get signed to that NXT level, which is essentially, like you said, it's now their third brand. So it's no longer even like the minor league to national baseball. It is national baseball in its own right.
Absolutely.
You'd said something about role models, and we had kind of gone in that way with women's wrestling. Who would you say some of your wrestling role models are? Like if you had a wrestling Mount Rushmore, who's on it?
Oh, that's the question, isn't it? And I feel like I should have a canned answer for that, but I don't know. So my personal Mount Rushmore, okay, here we go. Okay, a good question. All right, brother. My personal Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling. Ric Flair and Shawn Michaels are probably my two favorite wrestlers of all time. Mm-hmm. And this is personal. This is just me. Oh, God, this is such a hard question. It'd be Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels, maybe Ric Flair again. No. It's so hard. Oh, God, it's so hard. Sting, like I said before, was huge to me when I was a kid. Is he like the best in-ring guy? No. Well, neither is Ric Flair, right? Like, it's so subjective. I'd put Sting on there, just put an answer, and then maybe I think Kenta Kobashi was a big guy who got me into Japanese wrestling early on, like when I came back to it in like 2011-ish. We'll go with that. That's a very weird answer.
Okay.
Bad answer.
No, there are no bad answers because it is something that's very subjective. Because if you were to ask somebody else, maybe even one of your performers, they might have, completely different styles of wrestlers that are on there because, maybe someone wouldn't look at Ric Flair as being like a really technically gifted sort of person, but he presented that character. Like, didn't he come up in a time frame where he probably had to fear for his safety if he did his job really well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I wonder if he was almost also the first bad guy that people loved at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, especially depending where he was in the country. But yeah, he was, I mean, he's the greatest of all time.
Yeah. He's actually, I think, even especially recently, really gotten some of that mainstream appeal. Like, he's something that, like, in the hip hop circles, people mention Ric Flair a lot. And, like, you know, you take some of his most famous promos, you know, and I'm having a hard time keeping these alligators down. Like, that's something that speaks to people across generations.
Yeah, I don't really know what's going on with that resurgence of Ric Flair. I see stuff every now and then on the internet. I'm like, I don't quite understand what's going on because it's just outside of my community. But yeah, and like when I came back to wrestling later in life, and I went back and saw what was happening when I missed, I'm like, Jesus Christ, like Ric Flair was still wrestling in like the late 2000s. He's like 60 years old. Like, what is he do? What? He's still, well, first of all, he's still alive. And also, he's still wrestling? That's crazy. Yeah, he said he had a weird career trajectory for sure.
Now, for Iron Spirit in particular, you know, do you feel like there's going to be a time where you're going to go from being like at the level that you're at to maybe being one of those bigger independent promotions, or is that something that you aspire to?
I mean, that'd be great. It's just so hard to say, and it's, you know, I'm a guy who I hedge my bets and I keep my expectations low, you know, just at a personal level. You know, really, we just take it one show at a time. You know, we have ideas of where we want to go. You know, when things are kind of down, I get a little down on it. I'm like, oh, I don't know if we're going to be able to do things. Things go up, and I get optimistic about it again. So, you know, I mean, I would personally take this as far as it can go. You know, also, I think it's worth mentioning that I didn't get in this for the business of it. Like, if you get in this to make money, then you're a fool, because there's a lot easier ways to make money, you know? As well as independent wrestling is doing, in wrestling as a whole, it's still so hard to make money at it. I'm just trying not to lose money, to be totally honest. And I'm just trying to do cool stuff for the community. That's really a big thing, you know, or cool life experiences for myself, you know, to be selfish. You know, I went into that very first show thinking, if I do this once and let's say it doesn't go well and I can't really afford to do it again, at least I did it once, you know, I crossed it off the bucket list, sort of thing. So, you know, I'm kind of just looking to do anything we can. And if it goes to that next level and maybe a couple levels above that, that'd be amazing, you know. We're always willing to try stuff for sure. Like we've talked about doing bar shows, we've talked about doing, you know, a show in Urbana, whatever we can do, just to kind of do that next thing. We'll definitely give it a try.
You're willing to try new things, and if I understand correctly, there's something new, something premiere that's going to be happening at this next show.
Yeah, this is like very exciting. So January 11th, 2020, we're back at our sort of our usual venue. It's the Normal Community Activity Center. It's 1110 Douglas Normal. It's going to be a really great card. So the big thing that we're doing for this show is finally we're introducing the first ever Iron Spirit Pro champion.
First time.
So I don't know which camera to look at here, but we're going to get it.
This camera.
Excellent.
All of them.
So we're introducing this fancy new championship to crown the top wrestler in our promotion. By the time this airs, we should have announced that it looks like it's going to be a four-way match.
Okay.
So four of our top guys are going to go at this. So we are going to have Roy Gordon, Big Beef Gnarls Garvin, local guy CJ Esparza, and another local guy, the Filth King Brubaker. It's kind of a hodgepodge of our top guys, some sort of wild cards in there, some high flyers, some brawlers, some really nasty guys, some good role models, going at it for this lovely prize here to be crowned the top wrestler in Iron Spirit Pro.
You're going to have to forgive me. I have to.
Oh, absolutely.
Have to touch it.
Absolutely. It's very heavy. This is a, if you'll say, it's like layered. So there's like 3 layers of metal here. So I think it's heavier than even normal. So a weakling like me is struggling with it, but we got big jack guys to carry this around.
So this next show is going to be a really big deal. Do you feel like it's got the potential to be your biggest show ever?
I think so. I think it does. I think especially with this, it's sort of signifying a new era in our company. We sort of spent the last year establishing ourselves, figuring out kind of what we are, you know, what venues we like to run, what wrestlers we like, that sort of thing. And I think our fans are ready to take this next journey with us. You know, once you introduce a championship, it's just so many possibilities. It gives something. It gives a reason for the wrestlers to wrestle.
Yeah.
You know, they all want to be the top guy, and if they have this, they're going to be the top guy.
I imagine that the local guys especially are probably feeling like a sense of pride because before you guys came in here, there wasn't that thing that they could kind of like call their hometown thing. I imagine that, you know, they're really feeling like they have to be, you know, they want to be the one to win at that. Do you feel like Iron Spirit around makes Bloomington Normal a better place?
I think it does. Yeah, if I could be so bold to say. I think the fact that they've pretty much all been family-friendly shows really helps. You know, it's another alternative. Like we talked about, it's just something different. You know, and we've talked about how wrestling has weird connotations to certain people. And if we can get away from those negative connotations and we can say this is a really positive, a really fun, you know, diverse thing, you know, it's safe to do, all these kinds of things. It can only make the community better, absolutely. And we talked about, you know, local businesses getting involved, et cetera. You know, it just brings people together. I mean, I have met so many people from doing this. I'm not originally from Bloomington Normal. I've lived here 5 or 6 years now, but it is my home. I mean, I'm married. My wife is from. We just bought a house. We're having a kid. All these things. Like, I'm sticking around, right? So I'm gonna get into the community as much as I can. You know what I mean? So just meeting the different people. Fans, you know, business owners like that. It's really helping bring people together, bringing a few people from outside that we talked about, you know, from different towns coming to check out town. And, you know, maybe if a fan from St. Louis came to our Night Shop show, they'd say, oh yeah, that was that cool restaurant where I had that really cool food. And it's all a wrestling show outside, you know what I mean? So yeah, it can only help. Absolutely.
So what you're saying is that this is something that can, you know, that those local businesses that do sponsor you, they're probably getting something out of it because if they're putting on the same sort of hustle as like the performers are in the ring, they're going to be able to get business from people who might not normally patronize their places because like, I want to go and see wrestling.
Right. Yeah. We've tried to offer our sponsors, you know, different levels of sponsorship and stuff, you know, just from your basic, put your logo on the flyer, help get your name out there sort of thing, you know, which is what it is. And that's great. It just helps shows your support, to sort of, you know, the mid-levels where we have vendor tables at the show so people can come sell the wares or give out, you know, coupons or menus or whatever it is. Meltdown Creative Works is a big sponsor of ours, screen printers and graphic designers in town. So they've set up a little booth thing where they give out like free stickers and stuff like that. It's really cool. And then, sort of our bigger name ones, Illinois Tattoo Company is actually the main sponsor of our next show. I should actually plug that. Illinois Tattoo Company in downtown Bloomington. They may be doing some sort of giveaway with their tickets and stuff like that. So, it's been a totally positive experience. I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, it's hard to see the return maybe from a sponsor side, but it's just people who love to help bring something cool to the community. Absolutely.
Well, I think that once you really start to look into it, maybe if you've never like followed wrestling, it would be hard to see what the return is on that. But clearly, since you say that there are people that are able to go and do this independently, that are making more money, and that this is creating such a buzz around like the last event that you did, that it's got to be there. But clearly, it seems to me that that this is something that can kind of bring the community together because it is no longer, you know, I'm sure that there are people out there that still have the perception of wrestling as it must have been 30 years ago. But
yeah, and that's, you know, I would say it is very interesting to see first-time fans come out, you know, especially like kids who maybe they watched it on TV or maybe they're kind of half into it or whatever, or maybe they've never seen it before, which we definitely have fans like that. So just like our person, I'm hitting my mic, like my friends are like family, or like my wife's friends and family or coworkers who come out who've like never seen it before. Seeing it live in person is completely different than seeing it on TV, especially in like an intimate venue where you're so close to things. There's nothing like it. And you see that, you know, again, maybe they won't go back and watch it every week on TV, but they'll come out to our show again just because it's something so interesting. It's so fun. And again, we talk about you can yell, you can cheer, you can boo, you can go crazy. I mean, kids love that. Kids are just like running around, going nuts, you know. It's just a great time.
Do you feel like, because you had told me it was Shotzi who had a huge line after she had performed. Do you feel like that just ends up, you know, really making the day of the person who's watched her perform? It just feels like I have to go see this person. I need an autograph.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because you can interact with that person so much, it just it makes it real and surreal at the same time. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's incredible. And, it's a really fun thing. I think this might be probably more for the hardcore audience, but personally, I love watching guys that we talked about, like at this level, and trying to see who's the new hot guy, and then see them rise. It's almost like through like collegiate sports or something, and then you finally see them get to the NFL. So like, now that we can show, hey, like these couple people have kind of made it, you can go watch them on TV or watch them on the WWE Network. Like Stephen Wolf was on that first Evolve show on the WWE Network. Like, you're seeing the next crop of guys come up. So like, not only like helps legitimize us. What's the word? Legitimize us a little bit. Yeah, it makes people a little more interested to come out because it's like, these are real wrestlers. Again, we've talked about.
Oh yeah, and I think that if you went back to my first memory of wrestling, I think that if as a child I had been told, hey, you're going to go meet Big Van Vader, I would have been terrified. But then I remember watching a wrestling documentary and finding out not only was his intentions for life getting into real estate and not just beating the crap out of people, but he was apparently like the biggest teddy bear that you'd ever find.
Right.
Do you feel like any of your performers that are like living their personas, or do you feel like they're completely different than what they are out of the ring?
A little bit of both. Yeah, the cliche is that the best characters are the people themselves turned up to 11. I definitely see that in some of the guys. I don't want to, but there are some guys who are very intense in the ring and then big teddy bears outside of the ring. I won't tell you who because I don't want to ruin their image.
Can't ruin
you know what I mean? And there are some guys who I could see that's them turned up, like they're in the ring, they're mouthing off, maybe they're kind of nicer on the outside, but I could see how that could be.
I imagine that's got to give them some sort of catharsis to be able to step out there and not have to have that filter on them. It's just like, I really wish I could say that. Like, I'm going to use that.
Absolutely. But in the end of the day, let's put it this way, I've never had to like stop working with a guy because they're a jerk backstage or whatever. You know what I mean? So everyone that we've worked with has been totally cool and totally professional. And they're all just, they're great to work with.
Now, you said that the championship match is going to be a four-way, which is like a multi-person, what you might call like a gimmick of a match. And there's different elements, like there's the singles match, which is one-on-one, and then there's like the tag team, which is two-on-two. Do you feel like you've put your focus in one particular area, or do you feel like you're looking, what is Iron Spirit's, their calling card?
Yeah, so we are, I would say, a pretty traditional style of wrestling, let's say. So like singles matches and tag team matches primarily. There's a big thing on the indies right now where it's like the scramble match where it's like 6 or 8 guys just going crazy doing like the big moves in and out. That kind of thing I don't really like because you don't really get to, you see one guy do like 3 moves each. So you don't really get a sense of what that guy's about, and just the matches are kind of clusters, and it's kind of fun to see it live because everyone's just going crazy. But also like being able to afford 6 guys when I can, book 2 guys instead for the match,
That could be my whole night right there.
Exactly. So in that instance, I think we're a little more traditional. We've had a triple threat match once, just because of the nature of the booking. We had to do that to get guys on there. This is our first like 4-way.
So it is the first.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say we talk about looking in the future. I would love to do more tag matches because I love tag team wrestling. That's a little harder because for many reasons. Well, also back to the financials. You got to book 4 guys instead of 2, so that's a little more money. But also, there isn't really a lot of good established tag teams on, let's say, the Midwest independent scene. Guys like to work singles. Just it's a little easier maybe because you only got to worry about one other guy and you're kind of making your own way. You don't want to be beholden to someone else, I guess. So like finding like tag teams who have good chemistry and work together a lot, it's actually really difficult. We're looking to push that harder, maybe just throw a couple guys together and see if they got good chemistry as a team, that kind of thing. So we're definitely looking to do that more. I wouldn't really say we have a niche, but that's sort of traditional, one-on-one, give those guys time to go out there and do their thing. Tag matches when we can, at least 1 on the card, try to do 2 if we can. Nothing real big crazy yet in terms of multi-man matches, or we haven't done any sort of, hardcore matches or cage matches or anything like that yet. I really like to save those for when they're needed. Traditionally it's what they'll call the blow-off match
Yeah.
to a feud. So these guys wrestle for a long time. They really hate each other. They have a problem. Okay, let's put them in a cage kind of thing.
So as an example, like let's say that you have two competitors that were so close to winning that, but only one of them did. Maybe because this has built a lot of attention towards it, you have that rematch. That's when you take it to that next level.
Right, absolutely, yeah. There's got to be a psychology involved. So people in wrestling talk about psychology all the time, and maybe it's a word that gets overused, but it's just storytelling is all it is. We talked about it's kind of hard to book storylines at this level just because of scheduling and things like that. But when you can, that's really what keeps people coming back, I think. And that's personally what I like. Booking, as the booker, as the guy who puts the matches together, you're going to wrestle this guy. That's what I look for, is that storytelling. If it's a one-off match, we'll try to find a reason. But if we can, let's have these guys go at it maybe multiple times, that sort of thing. Absolutely.
Now, this is something that I've always been curious when it comes to like the smaller independent promotions. When it comes to that storytelling aspect, do you find that, I guess I'll just ask straight out, are you in control as Iron Spirit what what story is going to be told, or do you put that into the hands of the performers?
It's a little bit of both at this level. It's sort of, as the booker, I kind of decide the direction, let's say the general direction, or where we want to go, or where we want to end up, and maybe what the central problem is, and then the guys themselves will work out the details. They'll fill in the gaps.
So essentially, you're presenting the destination, and they're presenting the roadmap to get there.
Yeah, a lot of the times. Like I said, we haven't had an opportunity to do too much. One of the sort of threads running out this first year was a sort of feud between two guys who are going to be in this match, Roy Gordon and Brubaker. It was one of those things where Brubaker's a local guy, Roy Gordon was a Chicago guy. At our very first show, they main evented. Roy got the best of Brubaker and actually won in his hometown. So Brubaker was not too happy about that. Some guy from out of town coming in, overshining him, and taking the main event spot at the next show, that kind of thing. So, they're fighting kind of over that main event spot, that unofficial top guy spot, since we didn't have the championship yet. This will be the
Now it's
ultimate
going to be
decider.
official.
Now it's going to be official on paper.
Bragging rights.
Bragging rights, absolutely. So, what that looks like from show to show. Yeah, it's a collaboration. Absolutely. It's if a guy wants to go out there and attack another guy, I can't really stop him. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. These guys get heated. It's a lot of testosterone back there, a lot of alpha males, we'll say. And so, things just happen.
Absolutely. Now, you had mentioned Kurt Angle, who was a gold medal Olympian and was just a huge legitimate athlete before coming to that theatrical element. Do you feel like let me just ask, are there a lot of people that have come from a more athletic background, or what is the background of the typical Iron Spirit wrestler?
A lot of the guys, I'm trying to think if any of them were like into sports or anything like that. I don't really know off the top of my head. I'm trying to think of a good example.
So it's hard to come up with what a typical Iron Spirit wrestler would be, because they come from so many backgrounds and they're just kind of connected by that love of wrestling.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's hard to imagine that some of these guys weren't athletes or weren't, gym rats or anything like that, because, they're so jacked now. It's like, you did not do that in the last year. You know what I mean? You've been doing this a while. You know what you're doing. I think some of them, like some of the local guys, had some backyard wrestling experience, which is always fun. Okay, well, so there's a guy, I know Travis Titan, who's worked with us once and will definitely be coming back. He's a Quad Cities guy. He was a football player in college. I know that. Yeah, just running down the list, it's kind of hard to think of who's done what, but they're definitely all athletic, like we talked about, like, even if a guy's not the most athletic, but he's sort of a more character guy, and he's like really good at that, we'll still kind of book him just because it's a different flavor. But I will never book a guy who's, incompetent in the ring, because they don't know how to move, that kind of thing. So,
because that's going to put not only themselves at risk, but that's going to put the other performers.
Oh,
at risk.
absolutely.
Now, you had mentioned a couple different promotions, that someone that may be uninitiated of the WWE and now the new AEW. that kind of signals that it's a different time coming about in wrestling. How do you feel like that bodes for the future of Iron Spirit now that there's going to be this sense of competition that really hasn't existed for almost, at least a decade or maybe more?
Since WCW. I mean, I don't think TNA was ever a real competition. I mean, I wasn't watching during their heyday, but yeah, from what I've seen. What does that mean for us? They say when the business, and I hate saying the business of wrestling, but when the business is doing well as a whole, or, then everyone's doing well. If one guy's doing well, then everyone's doing well. So, it can only mean good things for us, absolutely. Who knows? Yeah, it's hard to predict. I see, and I go back and forth, but we'll see if it actually ends up being a competition between WWE and AEW. Mm-hmm. But I've definitely seen, guys in our crowd, let's say, who have, if not AEW shirts, like New Japan shirts, or like Bullet Club's the big thing. Mm-hmm. So there are guys, in our crowd who are probably like local fans. I say guys, but guys and girls, of course, who are fans of the alternative, the AEWs, the New Japans. It's not all just WWE anymore. Just from looking at my audience, I can tell. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure it's only up from here.
I'm sure that it is, as long as you're working as hard as it seems like you are. I guess I just have one more question. What do you feel like is the best match that you've ever watched of all time?
I'm gonna give a good shout out here, and I'm gonna talk about actually one I saw in person just recently. There is a company in Indianapolis called Bizarro Lucha, mm-hmm. which is my favorite thing going on in wrestling right now. They are so unique and so idiosyncratic, and they have such an identity about what they do. It's amazing, and I'm super jealous. There was a match that they had, I think it was Memorial Day weekend, because they run Sundays, and so it's like hard to get out there to see them. So it's the only show I've seen in person. So there are two guys, Mike Quackenbush and Billy Rock, who are, I don't know, probably in their early 40s by now, and they were sort of like indie stalwarts of like the early 2000s. Mike Quackenbush runs Chikara Wrestling now, which is a pretty big company, and Billy Rock's trained a bunch of guys, as has Quackenbush. So Quackenbush is doing this, like, he's been in the business 25 years, so he's doing 25 big matches or whatever, and it was like a technical masterpiece. Like, if you've never seen wrestling before, you might watch it and be like, I don't even understand what half of the stuff they're doing, just because the holds that they're doing, the reversals, is just insane. Mm-hmm. But then again, if you saw that for your first time, you might be like, this is like also insane because of how good it is and just how proficient they are and everything. And just the energy in that room, and Quackenbush is a very big name. That one is still with me right now. Mm-hmm. It's so fresh in my mind, but it was such a good match.
Sounds like something that even if you were uninitiated, that you'd become invested in it, which is the aim, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the emotion in that room was just insane. Again, it's like a small space. It was like in the back of a brewery, but like the crowd was so amped up. You're seeing it so close. These sort of like legendary figures in like independent wrestling, especially. You know what I mean? They're not like Hulk Hogan's, which would be weird and different, but like it's important to the people who know who they are. You know what I mean? Which makes it a whole different sort of a layer. So that's a really good one. And you can watch it on independentwrestling.tv. You can, Bizarro Lucha. But if you use the promo code Iron Spirit, you get 20 days free.
Well, Logan, it's been excellent talking to you. I know that you said January 11th is when you're coming up with your Volume 7.
Volume 8.
Volume 8. Is there any more details that you want to give to people before we kind of sign off?
Yeah, just again, January 11th, Iron Spirit Pro Volume 8. It's going to be at the Normal Community Activity Center, 1110 Douglas. Tickets are $15 general admission, $10 for kids 12 and under, and now we're starting to do kids 5 and under are free. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a great match, like I said, 4-way. We have some of our stalwarts who are going to be there. Infamy, the tag team of Dion Roosman and Joe Asa, Dante Leon, who's 5-0 undefeated. Just a whole bunch of really great matches. The first of the year, so it's kind of our kickoff, our sort of season premiere, if you will. Mm-hmm. Crowning the champion. I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than that.
This doesn't happen every
People have been clamoring for this, as a fan, as a promoter. Like, doing this finally is like so exciting. Tickets will be on sale soon. You can get those pre-sale tickets online. Check us out on all social media at Iron Spirit Pro across the board. That ticket link will be out there soon, hopefully the next week or two. Come out and see us.
Excellent. Well, Logan.
Thank you, Eric.
Pleasure talking to you, man.
Pleasure.